Fritz, it's on. The Writers Guild strike. You are a writer. You know a little something about this. You're a comedy writer. And you know a lot of people in production and who are also comedy writers, who are on series and all the rest. It's a brutal fact that the world of streaming has busted down the quotes and completely upended the way that writers are typically compensated.
And the sad irony of that is that some of the most creative, both film and television, is on streaming now. It's the most in-depth and the most creative and the most unfettered by the typical conventions of network television. It's really sad. I heard, I don't know who it was, but I was listening to CNN in the car, and they had one of the writers who was beginning to set up for the picket lines. And he said one of the executives at Paramount or Universal had made $250 million in 1 year last year, which is exactly the amount it would take to pay off what the Writers Guild is asking for both the East Coast and the West Coast to solve this problem, which I thought was very sad.
Yeah, no, you're right.
He said they've turned writers' rooms, they want to do away with writers' rooms completely. They want to make it what they call gig work, which is you never know if you're going to have a job. You do a writing assignment and hope you get hired again, which in a creative industry seems to be a really bad way to run it.
Well, they have what they're called these mini rooms. So it's not the full writing staff and it's not the full commitment. A smaller number of writers beat out episodes and story arcs. And in so doing, they essentially create the series and do all the heavy lifting associated with the writing. But they're only compensated for this little session that they're doing. They're not given a piece of all those episodes that they've written. And this is the other key thing about streaming. You know, we love it so much, and as Fritz says, some of the the best stuff is on streaming now because streaming has become sort of the default way in which we get a lot of this entertainment. But there is really no residual associated with streaming. And so all the ways that writers used to really be able to make a living because your show's in reruns, your show continues on, it has a half-life that's really long. It now has that, but it's in the streaming world where you're not getting compensated.
And it seems from a business standpoint where this is the industry shooting itself in the foot. Because if you don't have the script, you don't have the content, you don't have the show.
That's so true. I mean, you can't do anything without the writers. So the strike started at midnight. There's going to be the beginning of, protest lines and all the rest. It was 15 years ago. You remember it. I remember it when the entire town closed down, essentially. You've got all the caterers and the other businesses that you don't think about, the props, they always talk about the cleaners, yeah.
There's a great show about that on Netflix called Broadway Rising, which was about what happened during the pandemic when Broadway shut down and all the peripheral industries, as you describe, the caterers, the delis, the florists that all ate it for the whole 2 years. And it was a very personal story. And it's sad. It's going to happen right here, right in our neighborhood.
No, it's true. And the other thing I would say is a lot of these businesses are just getting on their feet after COVID. I mean, we're asking industries that have already taken a body blow to, take another one. So again, what's happened is the writers have seen their world go from a really good living to kind of a gig day rate, as Fritz was saying, a gig economy, where you're getting a day rate. Well, that's just not the way the Writers Guild has always interacted with Hollywood. And the minute that streaming came on, then we'll move on to another topic, but the minute streaming came on, you saw the way the studios were handling it. They were essentially stonewalling the writers on any streaming revenue. So
they're getting killed in residuals just the way they got killed when cable came out and content went to cable. The same thing happened. They got a fraction of what the residuals were for their network, their broadcast work.
And the last thing I'll say is that, and I've said it a few times here, they don't like to talk about it, but now it's out there as a front and center issue. AI and the creation of scripts. Imagine watching a series, watching a movie that was written by AI. And then all you need is a guy like Fritz, like a comedy writer or somebody to do polish on the dialogue. You add some jokes, you add some stuff. The AI doesn't quite make it really fit, and it's ready for prime time.
Mm-hmm.
So AI, they're trying to limit the ways in which AI can be used by studios and it can be part of the creative process. What's the grim reality here is that the studios are stonewalling them again all the way. I mean, there really is no negotiation. There's this, they talk about the fact that, they're negotiating into the night. When, from what I'm learning from those involved in these negotiations, there is almost no dialogue going on. The studios are just standing firm. And that's one of my issues with media mergers. Fritz, these companies have become so enormous that you don't have any competition anymore. You can't make a deal anywhere because there are really only a handful of companies that are there to make a deal. So it could be a long time, I guess, is the point. So that's the deal on the writer's strike in Hollywood.
The Mark Thompson Show.
The J.P. Morgan takeover of First Republic continues, and while it's happening, it has created some nervousness across the banking system. I suspect that most of our listeners don't have, more than the $250,000 that will likely be backstopped by the FDIC, but still, what's happening is there's an uneasy relationship now between the banking world and the government because the government's being called upon to backstop more and more. So that's something to keep an eye on. But essentially, First Republic's right in the city of San Francisco. And it's the second biggest bank failure in U.S. history.
So is the SVB situation and the First Republic situation connected? Because they're both Bay Area banks.
Yeah. I think you could say the run might be connected, right? In that what happened with the SVB was I think there were a bunch of those tech bros who sort of began to say, hey, get your money out of there, and you saw it happen. Even Peter Thiel's crew, although Thiel left his money in, Peter Thiel's crew got their money out. So that started a run there. And then I think there was an insecurity about where all the money was. And of course, First Republic had a lot, didn't they, Kim? They had a lot of very high-end, heavily invested, not even institutional money. I mean, personal money. Am I right about that? Kim, are you still with us? No? Kim's moved on.
No, let me pop myself in. I think what happened is that what you were mentioning about Silicon Valley Bank touched off, let's look at other banks, right? And found that the First Republic Bank then was on shaky ground as well. So it didn't take long. And I think there was one other bank in New York. So now you have three banks that have failed that
Signature
are
Bank.
connected.
Signature,
Signature
exactly.
Bank, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all because once you have a problem with one bank, let's start looking around and see who else isn't firmly, able to do business.
But these are wealthy private investors at First Republic, also at SVB. So SVB, they began to pull their money out en masse, right?
Yeah,
then you had that anxiety
niche banks, right?
Yeah.
Like that don't really apply to everyone because not a lot of people. I remember Station X, we had to do the commercial for First Republic Bank for years. I must have done it a million times. It was First Republic Bank, personal banking, business banking, wealth management. At First Republic Bank, it's a privilege to serve you. It's for the rich of the rich, right? I mean, it's not for the Joe Blow who's just, gets a regular paycheck. This is for people that have a lot of money.
Right.
Well,
exactly.
thank good, Jamie Dimon and J.P. Morgan Chase wrote in there to stop this one, so the government responsibility will be less. But they were talking yesterday about this maybe being a harbinger of the end of regional banks. And to go back to your original point about there being like two banks in America because, the too big
mergers,
to fail because of the mergers.
Yeah, harbinger's a ding word, by the way.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, congratulations.
I don't even know what that means.
We ding like SAT type words here.
Okay.
So anyway, let's talk about your special. All right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Fritz Coleman is here. Fritz is a comedian, and you've done these one-man shows before. I remember you did a few of them on PBS prior to this.
Yes. I found a niche for myself, and I made up this title. It's called the Single Topic Monologue.
Right.
So I've done a series of those. The first one that you mentioned that was on PBS was called It's Me, Dad. It was about being a single father and about revealing the truth about myself to my children before I got too old to remember everything, and putting it on a videotape and stashing it in a safe deposit box. And then when they were old enough to hear the sordid details of my life, they could watch the tape. And the second one I did was about divorce, called The Reception. And then I did one about the news business that I was in for 40 years called Tonight at 11. And then I did one about aging called Defying Gravity. And this one I've currently done that's on Tubi now for free is called Unassisted Living, which is about getting really old. I passed the threshold. I'm now with Medicare and Social Security, and I'm far beyond that. Now it's just a survival technique. And I had a lot of fun doing it. And regardless of how old you are, if you haven't reached that old threshold yet, you'll still have fun with it. I talk about COVID and about having grandchildren and about having children and having children having to do school on Zoom during the pandemic and little physical aspects of the aging process that nobody likes. You'll just have fun with it, because if you haven't been through it yet, you will.
What? What is the? You may not be able to show too much of this special because we'll get struck there. We just have a little bit of your open. What is when it comes to aging? What is the thing that you would tell those who are not yet at the point where, let's say 10 years behind or whatever? As you call back to them and going, hey, just be prepared for this.
Right. Well, I think, I don't know if this is a female trait, but it's a male trait where you promise yourself for the first 3/4 of your life that you will never be like your father. You will never repeat your father's bad habits or his stuck in the past frames of mind. And then as time goes along, it's genetic, it's subliminal. You find yourself reacting to the world exactly the same way your father did. And I have some of the same physical characteristics of my father. I snore like my father did. I don't snore continuously like a Harley Davidson rumble. I snore in spurts like that. And the cat sleeps on my chest. And when I do that, the cat levitates. And anyway, little tiny things that you swore would not happen to you because you're not your father, then you find out you are your father. And it's the genetic continuum of life.
Ever since I've known you, which as I say has been decades now, you were a runner. And you enjoyed it, obviously. And as you get older, I don't know about you, but and I was never a runner, but just for me to run from like the house to the car, I start to feel my knees or whatever.
Yeah.
Have you had to modify your regimen?
Oh, yes. I don't run anymore. Now I ride an exercise bike in front of the TV as I watch great courses on Amazon Prime. Yeah, I'm getting smarter. I'm not necessarily getting in better physical shape, but I'm getting smarter. No, but of course you do. Listen, when you hit about 60 or 65, the hubcaps start coming off. Little things happen, and you can't control them. For instance, you get up in the morning and you notice you still have the same dents in your ankles that you had the day before, because your skin, it does not have the elasticity to recover as quickly. So there are little physical manifestations of aging.
By the way, that you just described, though, is immensely. Why does that hit so hard?
I don't, because your circulation dies.
No, but I mean, the psychological hit. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my God, why? These physical manifestations. It would be easier if we just kind of all went along and then one day, bam, nothing changed, and then one day, boom, you buy it. Yeah. But instead, you see the deteration. You feel the deterioration.
It's a slow build. It's like the warning light, and
exactly.
It just happens, and you don't think it's going to happen, but it happens.
I didn't realize that I'd missed your special about being TV news. Fritz he's a Lifetime Achievement Award-winning Emmy and all this sort of thing. He was in local news for a long time. And you really, you hit the ball so hard there. Although I always felt and I really don't mean to be presumptuous with this, but I always felt your real thing is this massive amount of creativity you have when it comes to comedy and writing and all this kind of thing. And so I always saw, and again, I pardon me because then you're so accomplished.
Stop it,
You did
pardon
really
me.
well.
You're one of my close friends.
But I
No.
saw the media thing that you were doing, the news thing. I was like, I don't
But
know.
it was, I came out here to be a comic, and oddly enough, and real meteorologists hate this, but I was hired at the Comedy Store. I was doing a show at the Comedy Store, and the news director and his wife were there, and I got this job. So I really would have felt like I sold my soul if I had to stop the comedy when I did the weather. I was the main weatherman at NBC in Los Angeles for 40 years.
Yeah.
But I continued. I was doing 2 or 3 shows a week, so it wasn't that I gave up my passion. What I was really doing was giving my kids a stable life.
Sure.
And being able to have some continuity in my life that when you go on the road as a mid-level comedian, and you make $700 and spend $600 on transportation, working at Giggles in Cincinnati and coming back with $50 left, you can't do that with kids.
Right. Yeah.
So I was blessed on many things,
Do you think, this is interesting, this is from Peace. She says, Clint Eastwood says he doesn't let the old man in. Do you think there is a quality of that where you just sort of never, if you somehow just live in denial, as best you can?
You can live in denial if you're not trying to write material about it every day. Then you have to address it head on. And my feeling is if you just walk through the middle of it and the whole thing, I'm an observational comic. They're not setups and punchlines and stuff. It's describing common experiences that maybe other people would not put in their own words. And so this is a rich territory for me. And the reason why they bought this special on Tubi was because I was addressing a very underserved demographic in stand-up, and that is older people. First of all, for content, talking about what it's like to be old. Second of all, people could love Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock, who are the best in the business without question. But there are people that are older people that just can't be hammered by the language for the whole thing. It doesn't bother me, but it bothers old people. So I work relatively clean, and I address an older demographic, which was sort of this niche that Tubi found enticing to put on their streaming service.
Well, I love that you've got the special. Again, it's on Tubi. Your other specials are on YouTube. Where can I go back and get those?
There are a couple of chunks of them on YouTube. The one-person show that you talked about first, which was my first one, called It's Me, Dad, was purchased by public television, and because it was about fatherhood, they aired it every year for 7 years on Father's Day at KCET, which was the public television station in Los Angeles.
I see. Yeah.
So I don't know if that one's available, but the chunks of the other ones are available.
Google Fritz. You'll love it. It's a great ride. Fritz Coleman. And again, the new one is Unassisted Living. It's on Tubi. Fritz, love you. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you, my friend, for letting me talk about it.
Please come again. I love it. We'll talk about getting old.
Before we let him go, I just
Yes.
wanted to note this. When I did a Google search for Fritz Coleman's Unassisted Living, I found this: Coleman Fields Assisted Living.
If I have that is hysterical.
Wow,
Yeah.
I had a piece of that.
See, I would actually name if I had a facility, I would name it that. That sounds cool.
Coleman Fields.
Fields.
I love it. Yeah, it sounds like a place they play baseball. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.